Welcome to the Fantasy Bros Fancast with your bros, Mark, Tanner, Jarrell, and Terrell.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of your Fantasy Bros Fancast. We've got the usual guys on this week. Terrell was missing last week. We've got Tanner Thompson, Mark Peterson, Terrell, like I said, myself, your host this week, Jarrell Sikora. Throwing a couple of shameless plugs here. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Bros Fancast. You guys can hit each one of us up for questions throughout the week. We'll be definitely giving you the answers to what you're looking for. Not like a lot of these guys out there, you're throwing questions at them and they don't answer you at all. Us for sure, we're definitely giving you the answer and hopefully helping you get the win for the week. On today's episode, we're going to go through some studs and duds so far throughout the year. And then we're going to throw some trade targets that you guys can all look at and say, hey, I'm going to buy this guy low or sell my guy high. We've got, I'm going to give a shout out here right now. Use these guys today quite a bit. The website's called Fantasy Scout. We use them a lot for strength of schedule analysis. So we use them today and just kind of want to give them a shout out. So anyways, enough of me. We're going to go start with some studs and duds here. And Terrell, let's start with you. So what are your thoughts on some of these guys out there that are struggling pretty hard and some guys that have maybe gone past your expectations so far to start the year?
Okay, well, the guy I'm going to start out with tonight is Carlos Hyde. He's just been a complete stud this year, I think, for a team that's not expected to do a lot. He's putting up, on average, 84.3 yards per game so far through three games, which has come to about 5.2 yards per carry. He's had 12 catches for 61 yards too. So if you're in a PPR league, that's getting you a lot of points. And he's gotten, I don't know the stats on how many touchdowns he has. I think he's got a couple touchdowns, but overall numbers: 49 rushes for 253 yards, 12 catches for 61 yards. Those are RB1 numbers right now, and a lot of people were drafting him probably early fourth, maybe late fourth, early fifth round. You're not expecting those types of numbers right out of a guy like Carlos Hyde, and he's giving you great bang for your buck right now. And a dud I'm looking at is Amari Cooper. He's only had 10 catches on 23 targets so far for 101 yards and 1 TD. Now, those aren't spectacular numbers at all. You drafted him probably in the second round, I'm guessing. And for a guy that's in his third year within that offense, should be putting up huge numbers week in, week out. And he's dropping a ton of balls. He's dropped out, I think it's about 5 or 6 catches, or five or 6 balls right now. And his catch rate right now is only at 43.5%. Now, that is not numbers you want to look at in terms of fantasy. So I think he's going to rebound, but you just got to wait out this little cold spell he has here, because he is known to come along the last couple of years. He come along in the mid-season there, and I don't know what kind of numbers you're going to expect out of him this year, because Michael Crabtree is still there. He's still putting up big numbers. Marshawn Lynch is a big part of that offense, but preseason hype over this offense, you'd expect Amari Cooper with a lot better numbers than you drafted him for so far.
Yeah, I mean, those guys that you touched on there, especially Carlos Hyde, he's been kind of banged up throughout his career, and he's struggled with injuries and whatnot, but he's definitely come out strong to start the year. In your mind, Terrell, though, at this point, this early in the season, do you think of him as a must-start pretty much week in and week out for the rest of this year, or what are you thinking?
For sure, he's a must-start week in, week out. If he stays healthy, I think he can run for what is he averaging here? 5.2 yards a carry. So if he's going to get say in a 200 to 220 range for carries this year. That's over 1,000 yards, guys. That's when you're drafting him in fourth or fifth rounds. That is solid production, especially when you're not expecting that RB1 numbers, and that's what he's kind of getting you. Especially if you're in a PPR league, he's got 12 catches through 3 games. That's if it's a full point PPR, that's 12 points.
Yeah.
Through 3 weeks for just for catches, not including the yards. Those are solid numbers. I would right now, depending. I haven't looked at his schedule yet, but those are solid. Must start week in, week out.
I have looked at his schedule here, and just a little stat here is for the rest of this year. That's why I kind of asked you if you think he's a must start, because I kind of figured you might not have known his schedule, but he has actually the hardest ranked schedule remaining against defenses against the run. So that's maybe a little bit of a factor. I think he'll still put up probably solid RB2 numbers. He's played kind of weaker opponents here to start. But his next 3 opponents here, you got the Rams at home, and then you're in Arizona and at Indy, who has actually been very surprisingly strong against the run this year. Do you foresee any massive games coming from him, or do you kind of temper your expectations for the next few games here?
Well, Fat Rob Kelly gashed the Rams defense, and before he got hurt, was it last week, I believe. So I think that's going to be a good game this coming week. And I'm not sold on Indianapolis' defense. I mean, I know you're a Colts fan, Drell, but they don't have a lot of depth. They could get a couple injuries within the next couple of weeks at D-line or linebacking core, and it'll just be like driving a semi through all those lanes, I think.
Well, they're ranked second in the league right now against the run. So, I mean, I know you don't like them because you're a little biased there, but they have proven through 3 games so far to be a stout defense. What do you think against the matchup against the Cardinals? They kind of came out yesterday against the Cowboys and stuffed Ezekiel Elliott to start the game there, but he kind of turned it around in the second half and made some fantasy owners happy. So do you think that Arizona defense is something that Hyde can take advantage of?
I think it is too. I mean, maybe not quite the numbers he's been putting up right now, but Arizona's defense, they got a lot of smaller players there on their D line and their linebacking core. So if you're pounding the rock, those guys are going to get tired. Mid-third quarter, probably like what we saw last night with Zeke in the second half there. Those guys got tired and played out because they just kept pounding the rock. They didn't care what Zeke's numbers looked like at that point. So I expect him to still have, in the next 3 games, I would say probably about 250 yards rushing. So we'll see if that happens.
Right on. With Amari Cooper, he's struggled to start the year here, but he's also in the next while here. He's got some pretty difficult matchups coming up, and throughout the rest of the year here, he's got the 5th hardest ranked schedule going up against the pass here. So that's going to be a big test for that offense coming up here. But the next 3 games, they are in Denver, which is going to be extremely tough. They always play tough at home. And then you got Baltimore, who got gashed by Jacksonville a bit there. And then you got San Diego Chargers, who just put Jason Verrett on season-ending IR. So that might be a favorable matchup. But in your mind, do you think Cooper has the guts to turn this miserable start to his season around?
Oh, for sure he does. He was drafted in the top 10 where he was because he's an elite talent, or he's supposed to be, and he's proved first 2 years in the year here that he is a pretty good, darn good receiver, and he's put back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons and 5 or 6 touchdowns each season. So, and this is his 3rd year, which I've always said, and a lot of experts say that the 3rd year is when the receivers start to break out. And I'm looking at his schedule too. Denver, that's going to be a tough one. I don't know what he's going to be able to do. It really depends on Aqib Talib, but I mean, they got Aqib Talib, they got Chris Harris, they got Bradley Roby. Those are good cornerbacks there. So I don't really expect a good game out of him this week. Then he's going to then he's home to Baltimore, and Baltimore's defense is playing really well. They got torched against Blake Bortles, so I think that was kind of an anomaly right there. We'll see about that. And the Chargers, they got a pretty weak secondary. That should be, if I'm looking at the schedule, I think that's going to be the game where he breaks out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So we're gonna go and talk to Tanner here about his studs and duds so far of the year. Tanner, what are your thoughts on who you're nabbing here as a stud so far to start the year?
My stud of the year, and he was drafted quite high, but I kind of declared him as a dud before the draft. Devontae Freeman, he got himself some new running back money. He was probably in the top third highest paid, or in the top three.
Yeah, I believe so.
Paid running back in the league. Last year we saw a lot of Tevin Coleman stealing a lot of touchdowns from him, a lot of third down opportunities from him. We saw both of them put up really good fantasy numbers, but I thought, okay, here we go. We're going to see a bit of the passing of the torch. We're going to see a little more conservative game, maybe a 60-40 type game with Coleman and Freeman. But looking at Freeman's performance through the first 3 weeks, Freeman is getting 80% of the workload versus 72% of the workload last year. He's got the ball. He's carrying the rock. He's on there first to third down. That's what you want from a bell cow running back. And he doesn't look like he's gassed from a long playoff run with the Falcons. That's why he's my stud. Like, I can't think of a running back that was taken in the first round that's outplaying this guy. I don't want Gordon. I don't want Ajay. Ezekiel Elliott probably would have been in the first, but as we saw on Monday night, he had a hard time running against a weak Arizona defense. Le'Veon Bell clearly misses preseason, and we know what happened to David Johnson. So if I want to rank my running backs, I'm putting Devontae Freeman as the top running back in the league right now.
Yeah, you know what? You make some very valid points. I never really thought about it that way. But when you look at some of the running backs drafted ahead of Devontae Freeman, especially in our draft, like I said, you had Melvin Gordon, a bunch of other guys. This guy is just outperforming them all. And personally, I watched some of that game yesterday. And, man, Zeke Elliott just looks like, he does the shovel thing and all that. This looks like he's just shoveling McDoubles down his throat. I mean, the guy looks way out of shape. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to trust him much all year. I don't think he's going to put up huge numbers like he did last year. But Devontae Freeman, yeah, this guy keeps chugging along, and he's definitely a stud to start the year. Going to his schedule here, he's got 14th ranked schedule right now, so 14th best, or easiest, I guess you can say, against the run coming up here. So, I mean, he's got a favorable schedule coming up. And in your opinion, you got Buffalo coming up this week, and then he's got a bye. Then you're going up against the Patriots and the Dolphins. Both you're in New England, and you're at home against Buffalo and the Dolphins here. Do you foresee him putting up potentially the biggest numbers out of the top ranked running backs coming up here?
I don't see, other than maybe Kareem Hunt, because that guy doesn't look like anyone can stop him. Yeah, he's going to probably he's probably going to average 20 points a game. I know that he's getting the ball on the goal line, and I'm trying to compare him to other running backs in history, and LaDainian Tomlinson comes to mind. He can run through the tackles, and he's elusive enough that he can run the sweep plays. He can run the screens. He's an all-around great back. The fact that they had that long playoff run and he's got the concussion history, there's some risk there. But as long as he's healthy, he's a top 1 or 2 running back in the league this year, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you on that. Another guy that's kind of came out of nowhere is not a lot of guys are giving him some credit is Todd Gurley. But we'll touch on that later on in the show here, guys. I want to talk to you, Tanner, in regards to your dud selection here, which He's kind of struggled the last couple of years. He had the shoulder surgery here in the offseason. You got Cam Newton written down here. What are your thoughts on him so far this season?
So it's obviously no surprise that Cam Newton literally fucking sucks. If he's on any fantasy roster, drop him immediately. I'll give you a number here I pulled off of some clowns off Twitter. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it seemed right. So Cam Newton over the past 16 games has a passer rating of 74.8. Brock Osweiler in his last 16 games has a passer rating of 74.2. We're comparing Brock Osweiler to Cam Newton. This guy is not an elite quarterback. He had one good year where he won an MVP and took a really, really good defense to the Super Bowl. I'm personally invested in this guy because I drafted Kelvin Benjamin and I expected Kelvin Benjamin to get 1,000 yards this year. He is struggling to pass it to his elite playmakers. Christian McCaffrey obviously can't run through the tackles. So Christian McCaffrey got 110 yards last week. 85 of those yards were yards after the catch. That's half of Cam Newton's numbers. He only had 5 fantasy points against the New Orleans Saints, who had injuries to their top cornerbacks. If you only put up 5 fantasy points against the New Orleans Saints, I don't know how you actually start for an actual NFL roster. And you can't correlate fantasy numbers to real life talent, but I don't know. The backup might have done just as good of a job on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at his numbers so far throughout the year here, he's got just over 550 yards passing. I mean, that's in 3 games. Like Tom Brady damn near threw 500 yards just a couple of weeks ago there. So like Cam Newton's only averaging 189 yards per game. He's only got 2 touchdowns, and he's got 4 picks and 10 sacks so far to start the year. I mean, and to throw in there 3 fumbles too. That's making me worry. And if I'm a guy that owns Cam Newton in our league, and one of them actually happens to be in this chat, what an idiot.
Yeah.
But I'm seriously considering just plain old dropping this guy. There is guys like Jared Goff out there who've started this year on fire, and Cam Newton is a complete. If you want to look a dud up in the fucking dictionary this year, Cam Newton might be that definition of dud. So I couldn't agree more with your selection there. He's been just terrible.
And I got fun for trading Newton for Cousins after week 1.
Well, there was more
you got some grief, that's for sure.
But the one point I did want to make is Cam Newton is a virus, and we should be and really people should just avoid the Carolina Panthers as long as Cam Newton is the quarterback. That means Kelvin Benjamin. That means they lost Greg Olsen, but Greg Olsen wasn't an effective weapon this year. The first 2 weeks they didn't even did they get a touchdown? I think week one he had 2 passing touchdowns against San Francisco. But Greg Olsen wasn't a weapon. Kelvin Benjamin hasn't proved to be any sort of weapon this year. Funchess, if that's their top option, God help me, they might lose every fucking game this year.
That's fucking atrocious.
And Christian McCaffrey can't run through the tackles. He's basically your gadget running back. Jonathan Stewart is about 1,000 years old. Stay away from the Carolina Panthers. They got 2 easy wins. I foresee that team getting like a 4-12 year this year. It is that bad. When you put up a performance like that against the New Orleans Saints, and I'm a Saints fan, but the Saints should not be embarrassing the Panthers the way they did, especially with that defense.
I just want to throw a quick. I just want to cut you off there for a quick second, just to kind of maybe ease your tensions about Cam Newton a little bit here. He has actually the easiest schedule remaining for quarterbacks up against past defense coming up. Is that something that maybe you stash him on the bench and hope for a little bit of a rebound? Or
let me ask you something. What did he do against the worst defense in the league?
Yeah,
it doesn't get any easier
right.
than it was last Sunday. So if you drop him for Deshaun Watson, you're probably upgrading your quarterback position.
Even Kaiser.
Even Kaiser.
Kaiser. Yeah.
I don't know. I can't think of a quarter. You could get McCowan from the Jets. That's an upgrade. The guy, I don't know. He
Well, the thing
shouldn't be a
with Cam
fantasy.
Newton too is he's just not using his legs to churn up those yards either. Like, I mean, the guy is just not physically right, you know?
You're
No,
100%
it's
right. That's what won him the MVP in
Yep.
2000 and whatever 14 or
14.
15.
Yeah.
That's what won him the MVP, and now he's running into defensive ends because he's getting sacked a half a time or a half a dozen times every game.
Yep.
I've kind of, being a Colts fan, I know everybody's kind of giving me a hard time on Andrew Luck and what that franchise has kind of done to him in regards to the way they've handled the injury. But when you look back at a couple of the guys, stars in this league, or future stars, in Ryan Tannehill and Cam Newton, and the way they were handled as opposed to the way Andrew Luck's been handled. I mean, Tannehill, what did he make? One practice. Cam Newton looks like he can barely throw a ball. So I kind of look back at that and say, you know what, maybe the Colts took the right choice and sat him a little bit until he was 100% fully healthy, knowing that you invested a ton of money in this guy to be your franchise quarterback for the next 10, 12 years.
Yeah. Well, we haven't yet to see Andrew Luck throw a pass, so let's not
Yeah.
count our
No,
eggs
no,
before
I know. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, no,
I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark hasn't really talked at all. We're kind of used to the muteness of Mark lately.
I want to say one thing. Before you guys jump off that Carolina thing. But I think the best thing that happens for that team is that somebody finally hits Newton so hard that it pops that shoulder right out, and Derek Anderson gets a chance to step in. And he's an older quarterback, but anything would look better than Cam Newton throwing that ball. That might rejuvenate a lot of people's hopes for anybody they drafted on that Carolina team.
Yeah, for sure. Mark, let's touch on a couple of guys you have picked out here. So who do you got as so far, maybe a little bit of a surprise even to some guys as your stud so far?
Yeah, I got a surprise. It's a guy I picked out of the pack, in our preseason talk, who I thought would be a stud this year, and I thought it was Ty Montgomery. I said this guy was going to pay off for people who drafted him and who drafted him early, and he has. If you're looking at his underlying numbers for a running back, I mean, they don't look that great. He's had 29 carries for 89 yards. He's only averaging about 3 yards per rushing attempt.
Was that
Doesn't
last
look.
week?
No, that's for the whole season.
No, he's got 41 carries, 125 yards.
Oh, my bad. I'm leading the long one here. Yeah. Yeah. And he hasn't looked that great, but in fantasy land where we live, he's looked amazing. He's had 2 touchdowns. He's had 129 receiving yards as well for a touchdown. And I think he's looked like a really good running back to help. Even if he's up against teams like Seattle, they had them in the first week. A lot of people had put him as a bench. And I told you guys to start him, and he certainly still paid out. Even though he didn't rush for a whole lot, he still got a receiving touchdown, and I think did extremely well through the air as well.
I think when you're thinking Ty Montgomery here, you're not talking a guy who somebody's picking in the top 3 or 4 rounds. I think if you got him in the round 4, round 5 type area, and you're looking at his production, 18 catches, 130 yards, a touchdown. He's got a couple of rushing touchdowns, 125 yards rushing. I mean, those are decent numbers. I don't think they're top notch by any means, but I mean, what Mark you're saying there is, you're getting a good RB2 value out of Ty Montgomery this year.
Well, Ty Montgomery right now in a PPR league is the 4th best running back out there.
Yeah.
Now, do I think he's going to stay there? I don't think so. I think there's guys like Devontae Freeman who are below him. Guys even like Jordan Howard, who I think started off slow. Ezekiel Elliott's down there as well. Le'Veon Bell is out of the top 12. He's not even really considered RB1 per se right now. But I still think he's going to stay up there. And Green Bay just finds a way to utilize him no matter what, whether they're using him to run the ball or catch it. I mean, they're just finding a way to fit him in. He's a guy who, if you give him the ball, he's elusive enough that he can break some tackles and create a play out of nothing, you know?
Does his schedule coming up scare you at all? He's got the 9th hardest remaining schedule in the NFL. I mean that's going to be a little tricky, and they got some tough division games coming up here in Chicago, and then you got in Dallas, and then again in Minnesota. Does that scare you a little bit at all, putting him in your lineup?
Personally, no. After seeing what he did against Seattle in the first week, I just think that having a guy back there named Aaron Rodgers scares some defense, and they don't allow you to cheat down on you too much and try to take away that run game alone. So I still think they're going to find ways to utilize him. And like I said, when you got Aaron Rodgers standing back there, you can't take away one guy specifically. Right, and they got loads of talent at their wide receiver too. So I think they spread the ball around very nicely, and I wouldn't be hesitant on penciling in Ty Montgomery every week for the rest of the schedule.
I agree. Terrell Pryor, you've got him scheduled in as your dud, and who can really argue against that? Let's talk about him a little bit there, Mark.
Yeah, Terrell Pryor, he looked great last year as Brown and surprised a lot of people, compiling over 1,000 yards receiving and 4 touchdowns. And when the news came that he was being traded to the Washington Redskins, everybody thought that was exactly what this guy needed to take off in his career. Although, you know, up until our Sunday game against the Raiders, where their offense finally looked a little rejuvenated, Terrell Pryor still was nowhere to be seen. And I'm not sure if that's just a case of still trying to get something together with your team or make a connection with their quarterback, Kirk Cousins. But I don't know. Week 3 is kind of my last week, I think, that you give those new guys a good look. And if they're not creating anything, I think it's time to put them on the bench. Some people are even wasting a second rounder or third round pick on the guy. So I think it's time to bench him, especially when you got other guys like Thompson, Crowder, Doxson, Reed, even Davis, who steps in for one game, does better than Pryor has. With all these other guys looking to take off and really wanting to roll in that team, I just don't know if Pryor looks like he wants that role, or maybe he thinks it should just be gifted to him.
Yeah, he kind of looks a little bit lost out there. His schedule's coming up is a little bit easier, so let's hope for the fantasy guys out there. Let's hope he turns it around. Quickly, guys, I want to jump into some trade targets. There's some guys out there that are underperforming that this time of year, a few games in, they start to turn it around, or guys that have started off scorching hot and you have them penciled in to fizzle out a little bit. Tanner, who do you got as a trade target so far in this beginning of the year that you're going to look after and try and get possibly on your team, or advice for other guys to get?
Powell. And really the only reason why, and as long as he's in a Jets uniform, he's going to stink it up. But the chances that he may get traded. I'm looking at a team like Washington that's gone through Fat Kelly, Chris Thompson, who was the guy last week, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Losers. I've seen the video. They can't hit an open lane. If they get a guy like Powell, this guy's going to go down the stretch just like last year. He's going to put up monster numbers because he can catch it out of the backfield and he can run through the tackles. That's why I want to target this guy and stash him on my bench in the hopes that he gets traded. As we've seen in the past, trades don't happen very often in the NFL, but I think we've seen a little bit of that changing in the offseason with the high number of trades in training camp.
Yeah, he's he worked out well for you last year in playoff time. This is a guy that kind of turns it around You look at him about mid-season on, and he really starts to establish that role in the offense. I'm not really sure what the Jets are thinking in trying to roll the old horse in Matt Forte out there. Bilal Powell has shown that he's probably the better option at this point of his career than Forte is, and they just keep trying to run Matt Forte to death. I mean, the fuck guy is 100 years old already. He's got a million miles on him. So I would agree that Bilal Powell is definitely a guy you can look at as a buy low, especially on another guy's roster in this fantasy group chat here.
Well,
Terrell, were you just trying to sell him to me high then because you knew Tanner was thinking about it?
Yeah, well, he's going to use it now as leverage. But the thing that scares me is that McGuire from the Jets is getting, at one point they had equal number of touches.
Yeah.
If you are dependent on Powell being on your roster, you can't afford it. You can't afford it. This guy needs to be a stash, and that's only if he gets traded. At some point, the Jets are going to start shutting everybody down in the purpose of tanking for the rest of the season. They just aren't good enough.
I agree. And that's just another guy on Terrell's pitiful fantasy roster here that we're picking on. I expect that waiver wire tomorrow morning to just be lit up hot with
what's going to be. I think
with Slim Shady's name's going to be all over that.
Between him and Jeff, eh?
Yeah. Okay, Terrell. Let's touch on your trade target so far to start the year here.
Well, guys, I'm going to sell high on Todd Gurley. I know, Joe, you're not going to like it because he's been your go-to guy. He's been an absolute star so far. But I'm going to name off some good that he's done so far this year. He's averaging about 80.3 yards a game. He's got 6 touchdowns. He's looking smooth and healthy, more than he's ever before, maybe since his rookie season when he came back off that knee injury. And his O-line is clearing lanes finally for him. And he just looks athletic. He's hurdling guys out there and whatnot. But I'm going to bring up some numbers that are kind of, I don't know, they're concerning to me. He's only averaging 3.8 yards a carry. Now, for a guy that, with Todd Gurley's abilities, he should be up around the 4.5, 4.8 yards per carry type deal. He has 4 fumbles. One of them has only been lost, though, but that is very concerning. This could lead to a potential fumbling problem. I don't know if he's had one in the past, but this is troubling to me, I think. Going back to week 1, he only rushed for 2.1 yards a carry against the Indianapolis Colts. I don't know if it was just early season jitters, season opener or whatnot, but that to me, that's just, I don't know what was wrong there, but I mean, he still had a decent game because he caught a lot of balls and I think he scored a touchdown, but I think he had a fumble though too, but just, I don't know what to expect there.
I think just going back to the Indy defense there, I think that's the big key there.
And I totally expect the Rams offense to decline a bit. I mean, Jared Goff is out there. He's slinging it. Gurley, I've talked about, he's looking like a superstar right now. But I think this offense is due for a little bit of a setback here. You look up at their schedule, and I'm still talking about Todd Gurley here. He's going up against the Dallas defense. They held Arizona to very minimal rushing numbers last night. Seattle, they got gashed by Tennessee this week. Their D-line, I don't know what's up there. They got all pros at every position, but they're just not gelling. The defense isn't the same anymore in Seattle. So, but I mean, you never know. Maybe they come back for a bounce-back game there. The Jags defense, look what they did to Baltimore this week, and it was unreal. So those are 3 potentially tough games. Then you go to Arizona. Zeke was bottled up in the first half. He broke out in the second half. Like I said before, Arizona's defense is typically a smaller type defense. They might get softened up there. Then they have a bye, so that's probably a good time for their bye because they do have a tough schedule ahead here. But it doesn't get easier after their bye because they go to the Giants, then to Houston, I don't know if it's home or away, but they play the Giants, Houston, and Minnesota the next 3 games after that. Those are tough schedules. Now, just one last thing real quick here. The playoff schedule. They play Philly, Seattle, and the Titans in the playoffs, in fantasy playoffs. Those are tough games if you're looking to win your league.
I think just going back and yes, everybody knows I have Todd Gurley here, and I'm a firm believer that I don't think it's a fluke of what he's done so far. I think the number one difference in Todd Gurley this year compared to last year is Sean McVay. The guy is such a wizard on offense, being able to create matchup issues for the defense. That this guy is. He kind of reminds me of Jay Ajayi last year, where he starts slow in the game, but the more he gets the ball, he breaks more tackles. He's getting longer runs. Again, we'll go back to the schedule just coming up here. Like Dallas, I don't see them as that strong of a decent defense. Seattle's given up the most rushing yards in the game so far for any team, and Jacksonville. I mean, I don't know if I trust Jacksonville quite yet. Or maybe give him one more game and then see how that goes. So you're telling us to sell high on Todd Gurley, and you know what? I'm not gonna lie. I floated him around to a couple people. We've had no biters, but it's not that I'm worried about that. I'm still gonna play him every week. Mark, who have you got as a guy that I can tell you probably literally nobody's talked about? That is a trade target for you?
I've got a perfect candidate. Even though I think he went in kind of the middle rounds of most drafts, I am targeting a guy named Willie Snead from the New Orleans Saints. Hasn't played a game yet because of his suspension, but I think this guy is going to light it up when he gets back. Ted Ginn Jr. had the chance to step in and take over his role. And a lot of people were worried that is exactly what he was going to do. And when Willie Snead got back, his role would be up in the air. You wouldn't know where to take him, whether to start him, sit him, blah, blah, blah. Ted Ginn Jr. has only had 9 receptions for 121 yards and 1 touchdown in his first 3 games. They aren't the worst numbers, but the other thing that scares me is his amount of targets he's had. Through the first 3 weeks, I think he's only been targeted about 12 or 15 times, which isn't all that great. I think that he is going to easily step into that number two spot and help out a team who usually is quite the power offensive team, but this year isn't putting up the same kind of numbers and are matching a lot of other teams out there. Not going to exactly help them win games if their defense can't step up, but I think he steps in there beautifully, and he just may well be a start every week guy.
Yeah, they've got the 7th easiest remaining schedule coming up, so I mean they got favorable guys coming up here. And the thing with Drew Brees is another thing to keep an eye on is he spreads the ball to everybody. I mean, Brandon Coleman, I think he's got 2 or 3 touchdowns so far this year. That guy you would never pick up in fantasy football, but Drew Brees is kind of making him fantasy relevant to this point in the season, probably because of Willie Snead's suspension. Is there anything else you guys want to touch at all in regards to football or fantasy football? I mean, we had a big week this week. There's lots of upsets. I mean, man, when you saw these games, Buffalo beating Denver, Jacksonville destroying Baltimore, the Jets manhandling Miami. I mean, it was just all over the place this week, which kind of makes it hard to project your players' numbers for the week. Anything else you guys want to talk about?
I wanted to mention the one thing is we literally almost saw the Houston Texans almost take down the New England Patriots. If it hadn't been for Tom Brady's heroic last 25-second touchdown to Brandon Cooks, they are not the same, and they're really missing Hightower. This team does not look good, and Kansas City looks amazing in the AFC.
One team I think that's going to bounce back here too is the Bengals. I think the first couple games there, they obviously stunk it up. Everyone knows about it. But they fired their offensive coordinator. I think they're going to start using Joe Mixon a little bit more. I expect them to have kind of a better second half here, or not even second half, just a better season from here on out, because I think they're going to start pulling it up together.
While you're on that note, Terrell, okay, so this week they play the Cleveland Browns. You give them a win?
Yes.
Okay, next week they play the Buffalo Bills, the same team that just beat up on Denver. You give them a win there?
You know what? I am. Yeah, I think so.
I don't agree with that. Anyways, then they're on a bye. Then they play the Steelers in Pittsburgh. That's a loss.
That's a loss.
Week 8, they play Indianapolis Colts, probably with Andrew Luck. That's a loss. Then they play in Jacksonville. Jacksonville is not the same team. That's a loss. Then they play in Tennessee. That's a loss. Then they play in Denver. That's a loss. Then they play Cleveland. I'll give them a win there. They play Pittsburgh again. That's a loss. They play Chicago. I'll give them a win there. Then they play at Minnesota. That's a loss. They play Detroit to finish the season. That's a loss. They've got 3 wins on this schedule. They are done.
Well, you're probably right, but I don't know. I think they might. Who knows?
This team
Marvin Lewis is a smart coach. He has that locker room. They believe in him.
You can't coach dumb.
Oh, I know.
Andy Dalton looked terrible. He was missing open wide receivers. He can't even hit an open AJ Green anymore. I don't know what's wrong.
Yeah, it's a little scary down there in Cincinnati, and to think just a couple of years ago, they were labeled as probably the deepest roster when they go into the draft. They're drafting guys in the first round that they're not even going to let them touch the field for 2 years before they develop a little bit. And all of a sudden, you look at that roster and you go, "What the fuck happened there?"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, the thing though too is on that offense, Tyler Eifert's been like, you might as well look for a new tight end because he's not there.
Oh. Yeah, you just they just got to move on. He's just hurting them more than anything now.
Yeah.
I want to throw this out there. Just a shameless plug here for the old Indianapolis Colts. We got a win here against Cleveland. I know it's nothing big at all. But Jacoby Brissett, he's kind of come in, and you know what? He's got that strong arm, and I think if Luck's out a couple more games, I think he's somebody that you can look at even on Terrell's shitty fucking roster. You could possibly pick up Jacoby Brissett and do a lot better than Carson Palmer or Cam Newton would do. But this guy last week threw for 260 yards, 1 touchdown and 2 on the ground. And he's not making the mistakes that you would expect for a guy that's only 2.5 weeks into this offense. Do you guys see any of that kind of continuing on here, or what are your thoughts?
And this,
go ahead, Mark.
This is how candy canes at Christmas taste like to Indianapolis Colts fans. I completely disagree with you 100% on that.
Why?
They have one good game against the Cleveland Browns.
Hey, listen, I'm not saying that's turning the season around. I did say, yes, it was against the Cleveland Browns. But when you throw a quarterback that was in an entire different offense, and he was throughout training camp, preseason, all the way up until the last freaking cutoff day, and then he was traded to an entire new team to learn a new offense in 2 weeks, or in 1 week, and start the week after and come out the way he's played so far. I mean, you got to give the guy some props. I mean, it just shows. I'm just talking Jacoby Brissett's mentality on this. I mean, you got to give the guy some props for coming in there. And yes, to a team that it was in dire need of quarterback play, and to tell you the truth, that roster isn't very good, but he's come in and been able to make some plays.
Let's just look at here. Okay, Sunday night they play Seattle. That's a loss. In Seattle, that's definitely a loss. I mean, you got a little bit of false hope because that was the Browns. San Francisco is the game after that. Did we all watch that Thursday night game? Because fucking San Francisco looked amazing.
San Francisco. Didn't they give up 41 points?
Yeah, but didn't they also score like 39?
In garbage time, yeah.
It don't matter. That's
yes,
probably a loss. And then you're hoping you have Andrew Luck back week 6 against Tennessee on Monday night in Tennessee. The Tennessee that's a tough game.
That's a win. That's a win for Indianapolis right there because you can't beat Andrew Luck.
I'm just saying. It's a little bit false hope against Cleveland.
I'm throwing this out there for the Andrew Luck fans out there for fantasy, anyways. Next week we've got Peyton Manning's jerseys being honored in Indianapolis.
Oh my God!
No! Shut the fuck up. I have a feeling. I know they've kind of threw reports out there for Week 6 return, but if he can somehow come back this week and practice, I wouldn't be surprised. It wouldn't be a long shot to have Andrew Luck playing on that field the week that they honor Peyton Manning.
That would make sense. Go ahead and rush the guy for a dumb ceremony for a guy you pushed out of the city.
Exactly.
The Colts are a joke.
No
You traded your first-round draft pick for a well-developed quarterback from the Patriots. Your organization started the season with Tolzien and Frank Gore. You'll screw it up somehow. That's it.
All right, guys. So that's another episode recorded here from your Fantasy Bros Fancast brothers. It was a good episode. We like hearing your guys' feedback. We'll be posting this shit on Twitter and Instagram, and hit us up on Twitter. We're there to answer your questions. You guys have questions, we have the answers. We kind of use the hashtag book it because when we give you advice, we're booking it for you. That means put this guy in and don't turn around and don't second guess it, I guess. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we will check you guys next week. Peace.
Thanks for listening to Fantasy Bros Fancast. Catch us every week with new episodes on fantasy advice.